Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Executive. This is the first Executive of new administration 2023 to 2027. And I am Councillor Claire Douglas, and I'm the leader of the council. So welcome, everybody. And just for those that haven't attended before, this is the main political decision-making body of the council. Our priorities for this administration will be health for everybody, affordability of living in our city, the environment and climate emergency, and also equalities and human rights. And you'll start to see that feeding through all of the decision making that is going on within the council. I'm really looking forward to working with my executive and all the councillor colleagues, along with officers of the council, to deliver on the priorities of the people of York over the next 4 years. And thank you for joining us. So let's make a start. So first of all, apologies. We have no apologies today. Everybody is here. Declarations of interest. Do any of the executive need to make any declarations that aren't already on their register of interests? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. This was updated on my register of interests last night, but in case the council officers haven't caught up with that, I thought it's worth mentioning it here, as I've just been made a director of Verital. So it's a non-pecuniary registrable interest as an unpaid director of Verital. And it relates to item 7, as that company is referred to. It's not directly linked to the item, but I thought it's worth mentioning it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Anybody else? No? Great, thank you very much. Item number 2 is the minutes of the meeting on the 16th of March 2023. And I actually think I was the only person that was present at that meeting, and it wasn't in a formal capacity. So unless... Yeah, I don't find any problem with the minutes, but we might want to consider that. Can we, in this situation, pass the minutes? Is that okay?
You are entitled. All you're doing is confirming they are an accurate record of what was done.
Okay. I believe that they were an accurate reflection of the meeting that took place, so I think we can approve those. Thank you. Next section, item 3 on the agenda, is public participation. And we have 6 speakers who are joining us today. Everybody is within the room, and our first speaker is Flick Williams. So Flick, if you'd like to come to the table.
Good afternoon, elected members. Congratulations on your election victory and forming the new administration. I really had not planned on being here quite so soon. I appreciate that you have an unenviable task in trying to be across the many issues you inherit from the previous admin, including the note that says there's no money left. But whilst Rome wasn't built in a day, there are issues I should like to make you aware of. Whilst blue badge holders wait patiently for news of restoration of our exemption, disabled people, the two are not synonymous, are disappointed to discover that the inaccessibility being built into the first HVM schemes to be unveiled. I fully appreciate that this did not happen on your watch, but it is indicative of how plans continue to be drawn up without any consideration of disabled people's access being factored in. After all, it's not as though we have been invisible over the last 3 years. Aside from the problems with the permanent installations, and I thank you for the speed of your response in now reviewing all the impending schemes, access during the works was massively hampered and impeded by the actions of certain businesses. Despite raising this as a concern at the Access Forum on 24th of May, no action was taken and the situation deteriorated. On Lendal, the topiary multiplied, and on High Petergate, the Guy Fawkes Inn obstructed one end of the works with unlicensed cafe furniture and obstructed entrance to the narrow pedestrian walkway on the other end with their advertising A-board. By 5th June, the situation had deteriorated to such an extent I believed it had passed the threshold for disability discrimination and was actionable. I wrote to the Chief Operating Officers to say so, and all the issues were resolved within a single day. I feel sure that relying on disabled people constantly having to threaten legal action to secure the most basic rights of access is absolutely not how you intend to run this city going forward. But returning to the issue of cafe licensing and other obstructions, I now learn that we have embarked upon issuing experimental licenses. The flower tub on the carriageway in Fossgate has somewhat incredibly been given a license. Its only transgression was that it was missing 2 reflective strips as part of the condition. These have now been added, and we have to hope said strips have talisman powers to ward off hostile vehicles ploughing into the furniture and patrons located behind it. In other parts of the city, that apparently takes £3.5 million worth of reinforced steel bollards. In Fossgate, a flower tub will do. Cometh the sun, cometh all types of unlawful obstructions on pavements. Recent discussions have underlined to me that licensing do not yet see these problems in the same way that we do, trying to move around the city as disabled people. Please, can you offer reassurance that enforcement will be a priority to enable everyone to enjoy the city unobstructed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Flick, for your comments, and they will certainly be taken into account and have been acted upon, but the pavement cafe licenses certainly need further looking at. Thank you for that. Our second speaker is Zena Chapman, and she wants to speak to us on road safety around Acomb and Hamilton, Acomb Road and Hamilton Drive, and about regeneration plans for Front Street. You have 3 minutes, Zena. I'll give you a notice at 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. Acomb and Westfield residents were horrified to wake up and find that £400,000 had been squandered on a half-paved high street barricaded by 138 bollards, and want to know why money allocated for much-needed local regeneration was used by the council for an unnecessary highway scheme, creating a spiritless strip ringed in bollards which could otherwise be a hub for a thriving community. This was an emergency question that a furious Rachel Maskell raised in Westminster in April when the full extent of the annihilation of Front Street was revealed. We cannot find one person who supports this abomination, and we're at a complete loss as to how a reasonable consultation undertaken by the previous administration and costing £20,000 on the future of Front Street, in which local people asked for level open space, places to chat, mingle, shop, benches, cafes, seating, tables, planters, trees and cycle parking, could have ended up with what we got: high curbs and a wall of steel. Wheelchairs are blocked and the street market has gone. 2 ranks of cycle parking have been removed and businesses are reporting much lower footfall. People simply don't want to come to Acomb anymore. The What a Load of Bollards campaign has a humorous title and a deadly serious aim. We want the bollards gone and what the residents asked for put in place. Simple, obvious requests that most modern urban planners already follow as best practice. Well over 1,000 local people have signed our Let's Get Rid of Them petition, and our social media engagement is huge. We are loudly supported by disability groups, York Cycle Campaign, our local councillors and our MP, and residents from all over York who are terrified the horror that is Front Street will spread to their area too. The fact is that the bollards were not needed and not asked for. They've had a devastating effect on the look, feel and effectiveness of this long neglected area, and they must go. So our question for you is, can we force their removal and get what we asked for instead? The limp justification offered regarding the bollard placement is to protect damage to paving slabs from inconsiderate parking on Front Street, when ironically only 600 metres down the road, parents are desperate to protect their kids from cars hurtling towards them on their way to Acomb Primary School. Do we really care so little about children that we're willing to spend thousands of pounds protecting paving slabs rather than paying for much needed road crossings? Alongside Holgate councillors, parents had a long and frustrating battle with the previous council and seemingly apathetic transport officers. How can officers justify that a major arterial road that 2 years ago was deemed as a very high priority and was successful in being awarded £4 million of active travel funding now no longer meet the criteria for prioritisation? How can piecemeal potential interventions without time or financial commitment be considered acceptable when children's lives are at risk? And finally, how is this council going to challenge the attitudes and inclination that cursory and half-hearted responses to local issues are what residents have learned to expect? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and questions as well. And I'd like to reassure you that as a matter of urgency, we are looking into the Aiken Front Street situation and hope to be able to make changes in conjunction with the community over the coming months. Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Waters. If you'd like to come forward, you have 3 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I've just come to say welcome to yourselves as a new executive. Prior to 2019, I used to attend most executive meetings as a more productive forum to raise matters than full council. But it was clear from early days it was a waste of time under the last administration. I do hope you take a different approach. Early signs have been very encouraging. For example, I and Dunedin Parish Council have had more engagement with a new executive member for housing in 4 weeks than we had in 4 years with the last incumbent over specific ward issues. The election result has given you full democratic control of the council, and I do hope you use that opportunity to make it abundantly clear to senior officers sat around you just what that means, as I fear there is a great deal of confusion in some circles as to who actually makes the decisions. I also hope you take the council down a back to basics route, ditch the expensive and impractical vanity projects that have blighted previous administrations, and spend time and energy getting the council back working for York residents, and follow the 4 local authority basics. Educate the kids, or in your case, educate and feed them, look after the elderly, empty the bins and maintain the highways. Get those basics right and we might see greater engagement with the council taxpaying public. As don't forget, 2/3 of York people didn't engage at the election, which ought to concern everybody. I brought a couple of specific requests though for your consideration tonight. Some of you will recall the approved motion at full council in December 2021 to review the HMO supplementary planning document with a view to reducing the acceptability thresholds by half. That motion instructing officers to begin work immediately got absolutely nowhere because officers and the last administration didn't want to progress the matter. Might I suggest you establish a firm hand-on policy from day one and instruct the corporate director to initiate this review without any further delay, which ought to, combined with similar initiatives looking at holiday lets in the city, progress matters of great importance for many residents of York. The second request is for this executive to properly resource the environment services function and allow the 2 executive members with responsibility the ability to direct the function to properly and effectively manage the streets, verges and green spaces in line with basic standards and the much talked about but largely disregarded 2019 pollinator policy.
You have 30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you. Currently, those 2 have inherited a citywide mess and I really don't envy them their task. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Waters, and your comments will be absolutely noted. And I know executive members hold some of the same views as you do about pushing forwards on these items. So you will hear from us in due course. Thank you. Our next speaker is Lamara Taylor, who is the head teacher of Westfield Primary, speak about the Westfield Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. I'm here. I've been in education for 30 years and I've been privileged to be the head of Westfield for the last 4.5 years. And all I can say is I absolutely love our school with a passion. And when I was trying to look at different ways of improving and supporting our school community, I was lucky enough to be introduced to York University and Rebecca Clark, who's here this evening. And I hope you've seen my letter explaining the reasons why that I've wanted to come and speak tonight. I just want to tell you something about Westfield. Children really do come first. Relationships are the heart of everything that we do in our school. And I always think back to the quote from Maya Angelou that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's hugely important when I think of our children and our community, because we have lots of challenges. I'm sure most of you will be aware of the levels of deprivation. We're in the bottom 20% nationally. There's often a phrase that's been said in the past about hidden deprivation. For us, there's nothing hidden about the deprivation on our doorstep. But also there's a huge sense of pride in that community as well. And I never thought, I said this a while ago, I never thought I would ever be writing poverty proofing on a school improvement plan in my time as in the education system. There's lots of things that we have done for our community that I always use that phrase that are within our gift. And those are the things that we have control of. And they may be things like we've set up a food hub. I looked at the statistics recently for Breakfast Club, and we have 60% of our children who attend the Breakfast Club are there through us paying for them through pupil premium. We've provided beds for children. We know that there's overcrowding. We know that the low income, I'd say everyone still speaks about the impact of COVID, but the cost of living crisis is actually having a more significant impact on our community. And the other thing for me is that the children in our setting, they don't live in York, they live in Chapelfield, some of our children. They rarely come into the city centre. And so we have been able to change things in school, we've been able to change the curriculum, we've been able to do all of the things that we can do. But I think that we have to now attempt to address what isn't in our gift. And that's where the connections with York University have been really important to me in our school. I always go back to something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you mentioned already about the health and well-being at the very beginning. If we don't meet the physiological and safety needs of our children won't learn and they won't become successful learners.
You have 30 seconds.
So therefore, we need something else that hopefully is within our community, which will enable us to tackle some of the issues around multi-generational poverty and low aspirations. It's also something that needs to recognise the trauma that some children have experienced in their lives as well, to enable them to thrive. And for me, we have community school, and I think it's important that we should do something with the community, but also for our community.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments and those very clear reflections on the challenges that the communities in Westfield face. And we hope over the next 4 years to be able to do something very significant for them. Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Nelson. So if you'd like to come to the table, Councillor, and turn your microphone on, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I have come to speak to you today about the Westfield Centre, which is obviously something you'll be discussing later in the meeting. I just wanted to share some sort of reflections on it from the perspective of myself as local council for the area, and from the community that I've been out speaking to along with my fellow councillors. It's a huge opportunity to have £2.25 million being invested in Chapelfields. And the reality is that money isn't going to come from anywhere else. That money isn't floating around in the current situation with our current government. And I think that this is an incredible opportunity for our community, and to address, some of the issues and struggles that our community face that Lamar has really eloquently just put across. But I also think that, as Lamar kind of suggested, there is a very strong community, feel and community presence in Chapelfields. There is already a community there, and it's really important that anything that we do needs to be with our communities, not to them. And I think that I'm really pleased that the council are looking at doing consultations with residents as a big part of this process. That consultation process is going to be really, really important. And we need to be looking at the smaller details as well. What is this centre called? Exactly as Lamar just said, our residents in Chapelfields don't live in Westfield, they live in Chapelfields. So even from the outset, things like the current standing name, the Westfield Centre, really needs to be at the heart of discussions and consultation that we're having with our community about what that centre looks like. I really applaud the emphasis on education and educational attainment that is within the proposals and within the plan for the centre. But equally, I think, and I know that the intention is there, that it's really important that that centre is meeting the wider needs of the community and of adults within the community. And I'd really like to see an emphasis on some of that work around isolation and loneliness within adults and people within the community, as well as the kind of educational emphasis, which is so, so important for the aspirations of all of our residents within Chapel Fields and who will be able to access the Westfield Centre. So broadly, I just would really like to say this is a really exciting opportunity. And I'm really pleased to be able to hopefully see it go brilliantly. I think that there's so much we can do with this, but we need to get it right. And the only way we're going to do that is by engaging with our community in Chapel Fields, from the very big picture stuff right down to the little details. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Our next speaker is Councillor Waller, who is also a Westfield councillor and wants to speak on the same item, item 5, Westfield Centre. You have 3 minutes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of declaration of interest, I've been a school governor for the last 33 years at York High School, Oaklands, as well as 27 years at Westfield Primary School. So I'm aware of the efforts that have gone into providing opportunities for young people to succeed over a considerable period of time. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to feed into the development of this project, along with the discussions with Lamara Taylor and Rod Sids as local head teachers. I'm pleased to see a public report coming here today after months of preliminary discussions. This partnership has a huge potential for the area to build on the steps that have been taken to address the attainment gap, but to give everyone who is working so hard to support the community in Westfield, and it's done in a way that does not stigmatise the area, but helps to encourage pride in where we live. I'd like to see this project succeed in helping to broaden opportunities and to help young people to have the confidence in themselves to reach their full potential. York has a successful economy, but it would be even more successful if every community shared the same opportunities. This initiative will help to bring raising of aspiration to achievement at all levels to a part of the city where not everyone gets the same start in life, nor continued encouragement and guidance whilst growing up. I appreciate the work that the University of York and their team have put into developing this scheme with local schools and for attracting the funds necessary to enable the scheme to get going. And so now it has reached the point at which the timeline for developing it in advance of launching the centre can take place. I have in discussions emphasised throughout the need for meaningful consultation, specifically with the identification of Sanderson House as the base for these activities. There needs to be a very real sense that this initiative will maintain the current activities as well as providing new ones to provide opportunities right across the community and age. Having personally battled to keep funding for Sanderson House to keep it open as a community centre, it's vital that this community asset continues to be seen as serving the local residents and working with the Chapel Fields Community Association. Regular reporting back to the community will be vital. I hope that this project will do it regularly and demonstrate the positive outcomes that have been achieved. And I hope this can be done on an ongoing basis. The success of the Early Talk for York project in addressing the attainment gap locally needs to be followed through the rest of the school career of the young people. And this project has the potential to do this.
You have 20 seconds.
The breadth of the partnership and the opportunity to work with a wide range of partners and agencies to help address the other serious issues affecting the community. There are many families and individuals facing tremendous challenge at the moment. And so the intention for this partnership to work alongside those on addressing the serious financial, social and health issues is vital. And it's been heartening throughout the initial discussions to see recognition of this situation. I look forward to seeing this turned into a practical reality with a clear understanding this is a two-way dialogue with the local community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Waller, and those comments will certainly be noted and fed through into the procedure for implementation of the centre should it be passed this evening. And finally, we have some written comments as well from Mr. Sims, Rod Sims, the head teacher of York High School, and these have been circulated to all members as well, very much in support of the Westfield Centre. So we thank him for those. Right, now we move on to the forward plan, which is item 4 on the agenda. The forward plan at this point in time has a deferred item, the reablement contract, but apart from that, there is nothing on it as the council the machinery starts to work again, and that will come forward over the coming weeks. So please keep your eyes on that part. So everybody okay with the forward plan for now? Yes, thank you. Item 5 is the Westfield Centre partnership with the University of York. And speaking on this item, we have Martin Kelly and Pauline Stutchfield who will be presenting that, I believe, Andy Laslett, Rebecca Clark from the university, and I think that is our lot, isn't it? So I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Andy's going to start. We'll bring Rebecca in and then ourselves will follow up. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce Rebecca Clark. She's the head of access and outreach for the university and will be joining me in presenting the report this evening. Really, so you can hear directly from Rebecca about how this project has been developed and called the Westfield Centre project as the holding title. So to introduce the report, I just wanted to briefly outline the recommendations and set the background to Sanderson Community House. Sanderson Community House has been a community centre in the heart of Chapel Fields for over 20 years. It is owned and managed by the council. We don't actually have any staff on site. We rely on groups hiring the centre to provide activities for the community. Currently, the centre has 2 groups operating from the centre: Chapel Fields Community Association, who operate a weekly drop-in community hub and bingo sessions, and Gateway Church, and they provide some youth sessions for the community once a week. Public opening times, therefore, are about 8 hours per week at the moment. The recommendation in the report at paragraph 3 is asking the executive to agree the lease of Sanderson Community House to the university at a peppercorn rent for 5 years, subject to the public consultation with Westfield residents, which is planned to take place between the 19th and the 30th of June this year. Delegated to the Director of Customer and Communities in consultation with the elected member for Housing, Planning and Safer Communities, authority to negotiate and enter all the legal agreements necessary to implement the lease, subject to the outcome of the Westfield resident consultation. Why? Because this would allow the university to deliver the Westfield Centre project for the benefit of all the local residents and unlock the £2.25 million investment that the university have already raised. I'll now hand you over to Rebecca and she can talk about the Westfield Centre project.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you all for allowing me here today to speak to you. I have been working on this idea for 2 years, and it is fair to say that it has become my primary focus, my every day, my every moment. And so it does mean I sometimes find it hard to keep it short, but I do recognise that you have already seen a report with all of the details. So my intention, I know that today is much more about the location, but I think my job today is to kind of give you a little bit more on the project and bring that to life. And I'm very pleased that I've been invited to do so. So thank you. The University of York entered into a partnership with Inter-University in 2019. So this is a charity. They've been running incredibly impactful learning centres in the hearts of some of the most deprived, disadvantaged communities in the UK for over 20 years. They have almost 40 centres and some really significant evidence of the impact that they've had over the course of that time. That partnership is a really personal one to me. So the charity's first centre outside of London was opened in 2008 in Broxton in Nottingham. This area is considered to be the most deprived in the country for education, skills and training. It has significant income deprivation that affects children and some of the worst rates of crime in England. This is the council estate that I grew up on. I missed out on Inter-University by 8 years, I will admit, not quite that young, but I know very well what that centre would have meant to me if it had opened in time for me to benefit from it. I know very well what that would have been for my younger sister, and actually know that that would have had quite a transformational impact on my parents. And I've met parents and children who have had that experience as a result of those centres. They provide academic and career support,
They, not just for gifted and talented children, they open centres in the hearts of communities, they become a part of that community, and they build trusted relationships, not just with schools and organisations, but with whole families. This partnership is also close to the heart of Charlie Jeffrey, the Vice-Chancellor at the University of York. He built a relationship with Inter-University during his time in Edinburgh and actually made it the focus of my first meeting with him, and I think my second week after joining the university, and really drove forward that partnership with them. We've been incredibly committed to our partnership. Our first centre with them opened in Hull with the University of Hull last year, and we have 2 more centres opening in 2024. This is really important because it's this partnership that changed our minds on a few things. For me, it made me think very differently about how we should open opportunities for all. And one very pivotal conversation as a part of fundraising for Inter-University changed our minds on what our duty is to the communities on our own doorstep in York. And so that's where the journey for this project began. Now, I am committed to the Inter-University model. I think it's a great one. But what I've learned during my initial conversations with the Mara you've seen, some of the City Council representatives and educators, is that the Inter-University model would not be right for somewhere like Westfield. What's important to Westfield is a tailor-made programme, something that is collaboratively created from the ground up. And so this vision is presented to you today. It's the culmination of over 2 years of conversation with professionals from across the city who have a detailed and evidence-based understanding of what works and where the gaps in provision are. You'll see that plan, it's in there. The intention is to open a centre at the heart of one of the most disadvantaged areas in York in partnership with schools that have some of the biggest challenges, free to access, a physical space, academic, study skills, employability, but also much more than the academic. It's about a range of activities that will grow hobbies and interests, build a sense of confidence and well-being. And I think this is a really good point actually to pick up on one of the points that Councillor Nelson just raised around adults. Because I agree, and that's something that I've really learned from some of the conversations I've been having. Adults of the community, not just parents, need to be a big part of this. We've been looking at that from the perspective of providing a chance for adults to connect, to learn, to grow, to have their own skills and hobbies. We've had some conversations with adults already with their own requests. And I think loneliness and isolation is a really helpful thing to hear and a good chance for us to be able to build on that as we move forward. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. I'd like to talk a bit about what this is not. I'm going to reference something that Councillor Waller just mentioned about existing activity. This is not about replacing or removing existing activity. You'll notice in the documentation you've received in the heads of terms that we have a commitment to maintain all of that existing activity and support and facilitate the success of that. And I hope that that's helpful in reassuring all involved. It's not about progression to university. I think that's really, really important. It is the case that we want to look at the attainment gap and we want to see an engagement in lifelong learning and access to fulfilling lifelong careers, but that doesn't have to involve university at all. I'm the only person in my family to go to university, and I think most people wonder why I did in my family, and so it's very much not about university. It is not a University of York centre. It will be led by staff employed by the university, just as it has been led so far by myself, a member of staff from the university. The university will carry responsibilities of ongoing fundraising, of the lease, and will be accountable for ensuring that we meet the objectives set. And the objectives set by the community, and I'll talk a bit about governance in a moment. But it's not solely delivered by the university, nor will it be solely governed by the university. Higher York institutions have a vested interest in delivery. Some significant employers, Aviva, the Shepherd Group and Portakabin, cultural and heritage organisations will all be involved in delivery, just to name a few. The governance structure will not be about the university. I've mentioned in the paper a community advisory group, local residents group, young influencers group, several spaces and different methods for people to get involved with the centre and in determining what it provides and if it's successful. And I think that's perhaps a good point to pick up on another point from Councillor Waller about reporting back to the community and back to the community association. In fact, I think we'll do more than report back. I'd like to welcome the community association into that governance structure and actually have them involved in that conversation. I think that would be the sort of collaboration I'm really hoping we can achieve as a part of this centre. So in the next couple of weeks, you'll see in the document about the consultation from the City of York Council around the venue, and we'll begin to expand our community engagement as part of the project. We want to hear not just the views and the voices of local children and adults, but also grow a network of people who will be involved in the centre. It's a demonstration of us wanting to provide something that has been asked for by the people we want to serve. This engagement plan isn't about consultation. It's about beginning the development of trusted, ongoing conversations and relationships that will be maintained in the long term, come what may. The last point I was going to pick up, which came from Councillor Nelson, which is around the name. I entirely agree. The Westfield Centre was never a good name. It was a holding name that should never have become a holding name. It is the phrase Westfield and Chapelfield has many different conversations, but rest assured that the name will be chosen by the community. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'll hand back to Andy.
Thank you, and it's just open to questions, I think.
Thank you. Pauline and Martin, did you want to speak at all?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say that the centre will be specific to the needs of the communities in Westfield, as you've heard from Rebecca, and will deliver a programme of support that's been directly asked for by those living and working in the area. And as you've heard as well, important and valued activities in Sanderson House will be protected and will continue. The priorities of addressing inequality and poverty by creating opportunity and improving health and wellbeing will be important to this work and core to your administration's priorities. Having been to the Whole Kingdom Centre to see the partnerships work there, including the work of York University, I have seen for myself how being part of the project there is having a positive impact on children's lives in terms of confidence, attainment and social relationships. And they spoke themselves, but they didn't have anyone speaking for them. We do want to listen to residents, and I'm looking forward to our teams, which will be from our community teams who are already known to residents, hearing their feedback to inform the final decision on the lease. And we'll listen to the ongoing dialogue that all partners will have with residents into the future. Chair.
Thank you. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. So I think, as we've heard, this is in many ways going to considerably contribute to an improved education for children who will have higher aspirations, ambitions, and more than anything, opportunity. This brings not just £2.2 million to the city through local donors, but actually the interest in children's education as a whole, and that will be from local business. So it won't just be the benefits of £2.2 million. I think we are nationally suffering from post-pandemic in terms of an education system, and we are in recovery, I think, across the country. That's going to take a considerable amount of time and many, many years to address the issues that have been that we've seen over the last couple of years. And this is actually certainly going to contribute towards that. The education gap for children who are in some communities is too big, and it's been stubborn for many years. And that isn't just in York, that's nationally. There's certainly 40 or 50% of local authorities nationally where the education gap at the end of primary school is 10 months and beyond. It's been stubborn, and this, I think, will contribute to an improvement in that, as well as an improvement in attendance, which is something else that we're struggling with. So I certainly support the Director for Education Services, certainly support this programme.
Thank you. Can I open it up to comments or questions from members now? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. And as this is our first exec, I'm Councillor Bob Webb, Executive Member for Children, Young People and Education. I know that most of the people around the room know that, but for the millions watching at home, it's worth us saying that to start with. I just want to say that I fully support this endeavour. I think it's going to be really positive for Chapel Fields. I think it's a really, really strong move, and I want to thank Rebecca in particular for your work on this project, but also all the officers who've been involved in it. Andy, thank you for your work on this. And since Mr. Sims, head teacher of York High School, couldn't be here, but did leave us with a statement, I thought I'd just pick out a few key parts from that, because I think it's worth doing. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Sanderson House was a place where these children could develop meaningful relationships that would mean much more than the shallow relationships of social media? I think that's really powerful and really important. And it should have some really key focuses. And one of those is there is a genuine commitment to improve the life chances of children and adults in the area. And this is not a project that is being done to the community. The Westfield project will work with the community and for the community. And I think that's got to be a key driver here, because that is the only way that this is going to work, is if it works with our communities. So the Chapel Fields area of the Westfield ward in York has been a community that has been ignored for too long by the wider city. This is something that we can help the community set up so that it suits their needs and supports their people, in particular the young people, but also their parents and other adults who need the opportunities on their doorstep that others take for granted. I've seen some of the testimonies put forward by the school leaders. We've heard from Lamara tonight as well. And we can see that the real need is there for something like this to serve their communities. And hopefully this can be something that brings people together and provides the opportunity for residents that they haven't necessarily had in the area for a long time. For me, the key thing is the intention that there is to help the communities set something up that works for them. Again, it's the idea of by Chapel Fields for Chapel Fields. Thank you all to everyone who's been involved. And for me, this is more than just education. I think that's absolutely key. It's right that that's a focus, and I would echo what Councillor Nelson said about education being so important. But as Rebecca said earlier, this could be a transformative opportunity for families in Chapel Fields. If there's food on offer, that is not necessarily education, but it does mean that when those children go to school, they're not distracted and they're going to learn better. If there's a chance for adult education, then there's a chance to give adults opportunities as well. And this helps the community. And as we all know, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes Chapel Fields to raise the children going to Westfield Primary and York High. So any opportunities that we can give to those adults is going to reflect on that community. So in conclusion, I'm really glad that we're moving forward with this project. I really support it. And I'm really glad that it's one of our first acts on this executive. And I'm really hopeful that the community are going to get a lot from this. And finally, it has to be a proper consultation. And thank you, Rebecca, for your comments there about involving the community in the governance. I think that's really, really key. And it has to be a proper, real consultation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor Pavlovic, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I have got one question and then some comments, if that's okay. The consultation process, well, actually two questions. The consultation process is planned to go on for how long? And can you just give us a few more details as to what that might look like? And secondly, Pauline's mentioned, and I think you've all mentioned, that the existing provision that's going on in the centre will be maintained. How can they be reassured? How can the public be reassured that that's there for the long term?
Okay. In terms of the public consultation, we've got an intense 2 weeks of public consultation by the council to face-to-face meetings with residents, starting on Monday the 19th. For those 2 weeks, we've got a team of 10 community officers. We're going to go and door knock on a high number of streets directly around Sanderson House. So not just the immediate streets, by a wider ring of streets. We will be doing meeting people outside Sanderson House, outside the local shops. We've picked and worked with local councils about where the hotspots to meet people, including hopefully the schools. And we were going to brief them on the project, have a conversation and just really explain so they understand what the Westfield project is about. And then we've got a small number of questions to ask them around their whether they would support the Westfield project, and particularly around the lease of Sanderson House, so we can then feed that back, subject to the delegation of the decision this evening.
And then the embedding of the existing provision.
So we will be, as part of the consultation, we'll also meet with each of those groups. So there'll be understand the parameters around. They already know that there's things in the public knowing that they will be protected, those activities. But we will make sure that we've gone through all of that detail. They'll be part of this public consultation as well. So their comments will be directly fed into that. Yeah.
I'm just on a legality, that existing provision will be in the heads of terms, so it'll be something that we'll sign to.
Sorry. I think that's really important that there is something in writing and it is enshrined and it is enforceable. If there aren't any other questions, can I make just a few comments generally overall? And I'd like to thank Rebecca, Andy, and all the officers and the university staff that have been involved in this project. And thank you to everybody who's spoken and commented on it. And interestingly, listening to the comments that we've heard tonight from you all, there's one thing that strikes me as being incredibly important. Yes, Chapel Fields and Westfield is an area of significant deprivation, but it's not defined by its deprivation. It's defined by its people. It's defined by the pride that they have in their children, in their community, and they have been left behind from an investment perspective, not from any sense of will from schools and other organisations, but that is the reality, that the areas of this city are left behind, and their attainment and even their life expectancy is impacted by that. So do they deserve 2.25 million investing in them? Absolutely. And this is an opportunity that would not have existed otherwise. And therefore, it's incredibly important that, in principle, and as you mentioned more than once in your comments, Andy, subject to a rigorous, effective and comprehensive consultation process in which co-design of the, albeit horribly named, Westfield Centre, which I'm so pleased that the residents will choose the name of it, does this council and this executive support this in principle? I would certainly endorse that. I feel that, as well as the opportunities for young people, for their families, and as Councillor Webb has said, the wider community as a whole, it's going to be open much more often. It's going to be a real centre, and it's going to be a heart and a hub for that Chapel Fields community. So yes, thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair, and I'll take this opportunity to welcome you to your new position as Chair of this committee and Leader of the Council, and obviously welcome all of the other exec members to this committee. Obviously, we as a group, we do welcome this report. I clearly thank all of those involved in the work that's been going on over the last few years. I think I'll be relatively brief. People have spoken in terms of the ones involved in this project so eloquently about the work that they put in over the last few years and the effort, and it's really heartwarming to hear those stories. I had met with the Vice-Chancellor prior to the university when he outlined some of the work that was going on in this project, and it was really exciting. I'm really keen to see it progressing forward. It has been several years of fundraising and development, It's been several years of action that's required. I think page 21, paragraph 17, really does highlight the issue. We're tackling complex issues of intergenerational poverty, both in the city and nationally. As has been alluded to by some of the speakers earlier on and by officers, we have had success already in the attainment gap with the Early Talk for York project, but there's clearly more work that needs to be doing. And this opportunity, this third-party funding and the partnership work is another positive step, an important step forward, a unique opportunity for us to be able to make even bigger strides. Obviously, support the plans to utilise our council assets to advance this work. It is a very small contribution in the overall scheme of what's being proposed, but it's absolutely essential to make that small step to be able to continue. As has been mentioned, I do look forward to the consultation phase and I will continue working in partnership to ensure this is a long-term initiative and make sure it makes a difference, and it really definitely can do. The one thing I think did add later on, as I was thinking about this, as you mentioned, the hierarchy of needs, I think the earlier speaker. I think one thing I did notice looking through, and I double checked, is there is very little reference to health actually throughout this particular thing in terms of the partnership working. And someone who has a background in health, I know it can often be challenging to work with the NHS and areas and get them to engage in this. But really, if we're talking about improving health, well-being, mental health, everything, be that housing, education, employment, health, it all has to work intrinsically together. So urge you to speak to health as much as possible, and any help we can give, myself as a group and the executive obviously, to speak to health and get them as involved as possible, because that will be vital to making sure we have a fully connected delivery.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre, and it's nice to see that you're supporting the priorities for this administration with health for the whole city. Marvellous. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing this report forward. And I'm really delighted actually to hear, especially Andy, about the consultation, that there will be people out there knocking on doors and talking to people in Chapel Fields. I think when we discussed it before, I said I've knocked on quite a lot of doors in Chapel Fields in the last couple of years, and it's always a really valuable thing to do. But I just wanted to make a comment as someone who grew up in Acomb, just down the road from Chapel Fields, and I've spent the last 4 years as councillor for my home ward of Acomb. Chapel Fields is a really important place, and we absolutely need to make sure that this project works for the community that needs it, but we also need to make sure that we give the appropriate level of respect to the place that is Chapel Fields. For too long, Chapel Fields has been synonymous with problem, and we've got to find a way to turn that around, because the people of Chapel Fields are not a problem. The people of Chapel Fields face problems, and I hope that we can find a way to empower that community to take more ownership of this. And I think that going out for 2 weeks and knocking on doors and talking to people at school gates and outside the shop in Chapel Fields is an excellent way of starting that and demonstrating to the community that this is something that is by them for them, and not to them from people who have no idea what it's like to grow up and live in a place like that.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Anybody else before we move to the vote? Councillor Kilbane.
Just very quickly, Chair, and welcome Councillor Ayres. Cross-party support for the project, and also welcome you in your new role as leader of the opposition at this committee meeting. I just very briefly want to say that this is an absolutely fantastic project. It is described as unprecedented in the coordination of funds to make it happen, but this is something we are going to need to see more of if we're going to deliver the services that the city needs, because the budgets that we've got don't cover it, as we know. So in many ways, you are providing a model that we can use in the future to do more that our citizens deserve. And I just finally wanted to give credit to the university for starting this project, for pulling it all together, for having the drive and the vision to do it. And I think when people turn around and say, University for Public Good, what does that look like? We say to them, go and look in Westfield, because there is nothing in this for the university. This is not lining them up undergraduates or anything like that. This is genuinely an act of pulling resources together for the betterment of parts of the city that need it most. So thanks to the university, and I think credit where it's due.
Thank you, Councillor Coolbain, and very well said. So finally, let's move to the vote then. So the recommendations are on pages 17 and 18 of your papers. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations? Okay. Right, that's passed then. Thank you. Councillor Webb is very happy. He's just won another vote. Right, okay, thank you for that, everybody. Item 6 on our agenda is the Strensall with Towthorpe Neighbourhood Plan, referendum outcome and making the plan. So please, can you introduce yourself, John? Is that right? Thank you.
Start, Chair. This is the Strensall with Towthorpe Neighbourhood Plan. As can be seen from paragraph 4, the journey started in 2015 and has culminated in the recent referendum in 2023. The report was considered by the local plan working group and this executive before it went to that referendum, and we had broad cross-party support before it went out to referendum. And John will inform the committee as to the outcomes of that referendum and next steps.
Thank you, Neil, for the introduction there. Yes, Neil said that it's been through examination last year, and it went to referendum on the 4th of May alongside the local elections. I'll keep this very brief. The outcome of the referendum was a result of 82.5% in favour of the plan being made, and 17.5% against it. It was 33% turnout in the Strensall ward. So yeah, the regulations say that if more than 50% of residents vote in favour of the referendum of the plan going ahead and been adopted, the council is obliged to actually formally make the plan. The council is given 8 weeks to do that from the date of the referendum. So in terms of that would be to take us to 30th of June, so well within that time scale. So yeah, we're asking members to approve or make the plan, and also approve the decision statement, which is Annex B of the report. So the recommendations are outlined on in paragraph 2, asking the executive to note the results of the referendum, and that the neighbourhood plan now forms part of the strategy development plan for the York area, and agree that the Strensall with Towthorpe neighbourhood plan is formally made, and also to approve the decision statement Annex B to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Does anybody have any questions for John? Councillor Pavlovic?
No questions for John, but just wanted to make some comments.
Absolutely,
okay.
please go ahead.
Very briefly. Thank you, John, and thank you to everybody that was involved in the election, including the voters of Strensall. We have no options. This has to be made legally. Therefore, whilst I would like to see more neighbourhood forums and more neighbourhood plans across the city, particularly in the centre areas, yes, I think this is excellent and should be formally made.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Anybody else? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you. Just briefly to thank all those involved in the Strensall Neighbourhood Plan. I can't come to name individual with a significant amount of work put in by volunteers to actually get these things. So huge amounts of work when you think about it. And so thanks go out to those. Please support Councillor Pavlovic, and I know we spoke before the election in terms of how we might look to give that level of support where in parish areas to be able to get those volunteers in place to do that. I'm happy to work with you for that as a matter of urgency. And I don't predict things very often, but one of the few predictions I did make was this would be the highest turnout of any neighbourhood plan vote. And I think that is probably that by some country mile, the most votes ever for a neighbourhood plan. So I was right about one thing.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Right, let's move to the vote then, everybody. The recommendations are on page 77 of your report. Can I see everybody in favour? Thank you. So that's passed. Marvellous. Thank you. All right, everybody, we move on to item 7, which is the agency worker contract review, and Helen Whiting is going to present this to us. Thanks, Helen.
Evening, thank you. Yes, this is looking at the agency worker contract that we have with City of York Council, also known and trading as Working with York. We've had this in place for a number of years, and the current contract expires on the 31st of August. And what we've presented to you is a number of options, but one thing that the council does have the opportunity to do is actually direct award this contract again to City to Work with York. And what we've spelt out for you in the report is the dividend and the actual advantages of being able to do that. We can do this under what's called TCAL arrangements, or also known as vertical arrangements, where we have got 80% of the trading with Work with York, and we can simply do that, and it's quite a legitimate way of doing it as a direct award. That is the recommendation. I've set out the dividends that have been taken place in paragraph 8, and in paragraph 9 you can see that our agency rates over the years, although we are reducing them, and there's some details at paragraph 12 that says as part of, sorry, paragraph 14, that we're actually reducing our dependent. Is it on? Yeah, sorry, it just flashed. We are reducing our spend on agency at the moment, and you can see at paragraph 14 we're doing that. However, we don't believe that this will actually make us outside of what's called the function test for the foreseeable future. Should that happen, and that's something that Work with York has actually raised, that is something that we can actually do and progress forward anyway in a different way, and there are alternatives that we can actually look at. I've set out for you the other options that are available, so actually just formally re-tender the whole of the contract or move that in-house. Should we actually look at either option 2 or option 3, that would require an extension to be required from exec, and I would be looking for at least a 12 to 18 months purely to be able to go through that process. But they are both options, but they both come with a number of processes that would have to be put in place, hence the extension. I'm happy to take any questions, or if there's any further concerns with it.
Would anybody like to ask Helen any questions or make any comment at this stage? Councillor Lomas.
Thank you very much for this. I've just got some very brief comments to make. I think that, like everyone, I'm very keen to see us reduce our use of agency workers unless it's absolutely necessary for that to be a temporary engagement of a worker. Permanent jobs are important for both employer and employee, and should always be number one, and not just because of the impact on the budget when we have to pay a premium for agency workers. However, this contract means that where we do have to engage agency workers, the premium that we pay is much reduced, and that we get a dividend from profits made by the agency, which would absolutely not be the case were we to try to let a contract with a commercial agency that we had no relationship with. Our efforts that we are making to reduce the use of agency workers are quite legitimate and proper, and I know that officers are making efforts to do that right across the council, and as Helen has said, that will in future change our relationship with this organisation, but it doesn't affect the let of this contract at this point in time, and similarly the letting of this contract at this point in time doesn't limit our ability to have that programme of reducing our reliance on agency workers for the workforce that the council needs. So I'm delighted to support the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Anybody else like to speak? Yeah, I can see. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Well, consensus made it about halfway through the agenda, so we've done okay there. I think while we may have differences on this one, I think they may be around a more technical and complex nature rather than philosophical. I have significant concerns about the paper itself. I think the issue of the dividend is a little bit of a misnomer when you look at the amount of money we spend with work with York. Our dividend is around 1.4% return on our total spend and less than 1.2% of overall turnover. So the dividend itself is not a significant asset to the council. I think in terms of the TECL status, again, we're not entirely convinced. So page 107 and 108 does show the vulnerability of that TECL status and the potential for that to drop away. What it doesn't include is any reference to an increase in non-CYC spend. So that is predicated on the non-CYC spend remaining the same, while at the same time our CYC spend decreases. If you do the same, then your tipping point will be reached considerably sooner, and it would seem odd as a business to say you're basically excluding any potential business growth in non-CYC sectors. In terms of the retendering, and you mentioned that premium that we pay, I did ask, and I do know what the management premium that we pay on that one is. We're not allowed to discuss that due to commercial confidentiality, but that's not in the paper, nor is the management premium figures for any external company. So I can't possibly at this moment in time do an assessment of whether third-party retendering will be better than CYT, but with your retendering, it may well be, but the information that we receive in the paper certainly isn't. And the analysis of bringing it all back in-house fits onto about half a page. I don't think that is enough information really to make a judgment in terms of whether that is or isn't the correct option. So while this may or may not be the correct option, I think on the basis of the paper we've got, none of the three options are fully investigated enough for certainly our opinion. I think for that purpose, we would have liked to have seen a more detailed report, and we don't generally believe that on the information that's provided here, we could commit to any of the three options.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Helen, would you like to respond to any of that?
Yep, I'm happy to respond to some of that. In terms of the details on the dividend, that is obviously from CYT. They do that dividend. It's agreed annually by the CYT board. Once it's been audited, once the accounts have been audited, it's based on a number of factors, including performance of the business plan. It did dip in 2021 purely because of our number of placements from during COVID. From schools and CYC there, but that is something that is part of the shareholders committee, and that would be there. In relation to the TCAL arrangement, yes, that can legitimately, as I said, that could fall out there, but we can have plans within there, and that's something that CYT have actually explored as well and voiced, but at this point in time we are still within there, but it can be renegotiated. In reference to the whether it's commercially viable, if what's out there, we don't have that information from other authorities, from other organisations either. They tend to keep it very commercially sensitive until you actually embark on that. If we are going to embark on that, that is something where we would have to go and we would have to bring another business case forward. I do give you assurance that the percentage from work with York is competitive. If we were to bring it in-house, we would have to consider a number of things, like I've put in the paper, in terms of auto-enrolment. We'd have to set up an awful lot of resourcing. We would have to put them on the LGPS scheme. There is a whole host of things to do there. If I'm comparing just one or two costs that we've got in this current climate, if you've got agency where we can't fulfill it within work with York, we may go to an external agency, but their rates are significantly inflated to what we've actually got. And we have seen rates of the base rate of the salary plus up to 65–70% in some situations. However, if we do that through work with York, we have it much lower and we've got that guarantee.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Lomas.
Just a final comment of reassurance, Councillor Eyre, that obviously not all of the commercially sensitive information is available in the public reports pack, but we have had sight of it.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Kilbane.
Just a quick one for Councillor Eyre, just to remind him of the recent local election results, and he's no longer in a position to instruct officers or indeed approve or otherwise any reports that come to this committee.
Thank you. And I just would like to also add some reassurance that on the issue of as CYC spend within City of York trading falls, what happens then for City of York trading? We have spoken about the need to diversify their business, and Helen's been speaking to them about that as well. So things have been considered that perhaps you think haven't. Right, anybody else want to speak? Thank you. Right, okay, so let's move to the vote then. The recommendation is on page 103. Everybody, can I see if you're in agreement with that? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Right, item 8, finance and performance outturn 2022. So Debbie Mitchell is going to introduce this for us. Debbie, off you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report outlines the finance and performance position as at the end of the previous financial year, so 31st of March 2023. It identifies there was a year-end overspend of 4.8 million that has been funded from the use of earmarked reserves and contingency. The earmarked reserves used were the remaining general COVID grant along with unspent COVID recovery fund. So the financial position remains serious as unfortunately the overspends are recurring and many of the mitigations are one-off. We're still seeing those recurring pressures across social care, both adults and children's. And like I say, some of the mitigations that have helped balance the budget overall are not recurring, whereas the pressures and inflation has been a particular challenge across all areas of the council. So the summary position is outlined in table 1 at paragraph 7, and there's a detailed or more detailed analysis of both the finance position and variations and the performance across all areas of the councils in the annexes to the report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Debbie? Councillor Lomas?
Thank you. I just think it's worth noting that obviously that one of the first things that I am doing in my portfolio area is preparing for the next financial year's budget setting process, and very grateful to Debbie and the finance team for supporting us to be able to do that in an open and consultative way, which will allow us to make sure that we acknowledge all of the ongoing pressures and the financial situation that the council and the city faces.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Webb?
I'd just like to add my support for council officers, not in the finance realm, but potentially in other parts of the council that are dealing with these cost pressures on a daily basis. It's not easy. They're doing great work with very little money and in some cases no money. And it's going to be really, really tough. We know that. And I just thought it's worth saying that we recognise how difficult it is for council staff, and we're proud of what you do. It's going to be hard. We're going to work together on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll start by thanking officers. I wouldn't say it's been a pleasure for the last 4 years working with Debbie, but I've certainly enjoyed it. It's been incredibly challenging, and Councillor Lomas has taken on one probably the most difficult portfolio she could possibly take it on. So I do wish you all the best on behalf of the residents. I think what you see on the report here is the evidence of what is a well-run and high-performing council. Council has had to deal with huge pressures, be that the growth in adults, the growth in children's, significant amounts of inflation, the impact of COVID, and chaotic governments that don't care about local authorities. This has unfortunately had an impact on frontline services, be that customer services, planning, or elsewhere. I do have concerns that administration have promised increased spending in these areas, as well as increased borrowing, income reduction of at least 1.6 million, below market asset sales, unfunded pledges, not to mention council tax freezes, all of which will make things a lot more difficult for you. This does appear to be an apparent road to a decimation of the remaining services or taking us down the same road as Croydon or Slough. On the specifics of the report, huge pressures do continue in adults and children, and we will certainly work with you, as we have done over the years, lobbying government for a fairer deal for York, proper local government funding, and the support we need for adult social care and children's. In the report, you can't ignore the 25% uplift in parking income that's contributed £1.5 million in this financial year to alleviate those pressures on adult social care. We look forward to answers as to how the executive will manage their aspirations in this area while still protecting those vulnerable residents. One area we can't support, however, is a balancing use of ward committee funding that's projected here. The majority of funding spoken about in this report is either owed for work outstanding or committed to ongoing schemes. It's unclear why this decision has been taken with no consultation, behind closed doors, and apparently without relevant information. Will the executive member be writing to the local York firms who now won't be paid for work that they've done? Will they write to the hard-working and low-income families to explain why promised summer programmes and youth provision has been axed, or why their play area improvements have been cancelled? Hardly the general election starting gun their candidate for York Outer was hoping for. In terms of performance, as ever, the track record is strong. Employment 10 percentage points higher than the national regional average, almost double the tree planting target for the year. ASB in the city centre down almost a quarter, despite reports externally. Library visits almost back to pre-pandemic levels. The latest GVA figures just from April showing a 10% uplift, and static levels and vacant shops in the city centre against a national increase. And even in our shopping centres, Monks Cross, 23% vacancy down to 9%. The administration that have come in could not have asked for a better platform. And then I'll just take a final opportunity to thank officers for the work they've done over 22-23 across all departments to deliver for residents in what is ever more challenging circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor. I would be interested to see some of the evidence that you have behind some of your statements there, because they're not things that I recognise, to be quite frank. Councillor Pavlovic, you were first on my list. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just echo the comments that you've made there. I'm just wondering whether Pauline, as director responsible, can just clarify whether the points of contracts that have already been agreed are going to be honoured.
Yes, members were written to prior to the pre-election period, or just at the point of the pre-election period, when it was confirmed that those commitments already made or in progress would be honoured. But any remaining balances would be taken account of in the final outturn position. So I don't know if Debbie wants to add anything to
that. No, Debbie doesn't need to add anything to that. Councillor Pavlovic, do you want to continue?
Basically, I just wanted to say, until Councillor made his comments, is that although this is a very difficult process and it's incredibly stressful for the finance officers and you as Section 151 officer, you do your job incredibly diligently and turn up for executive meeting after meeting to give bad news, but you always do it incredibly professionally, and I'd like to thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. Next on my list is Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor, I think you possibly need to lay off the Lib Dem literature for a bit. It's not working, and well, it's proven to not work. But that you've just told some fibs there, and Pauline has outlined how you've done that. And I just think it's worth saying that I think as we start this new executive, we really need to start on a trustworthy platform where we're telling the truth when we're at these things. And I think that's really valuable. So I hope that you can see that that's what we're trying to do here. And I think that you've made some valid points about the difficulties of the funding position we find ourselves in, you know, and as I'm sure you'd agree with me that since the coalition government came in 2010, that has been really, really difficult. Austerity has hit really, really hard. But close to home over the last 4 years, and I'm really not trying to make this a ding dong and an argument, so let's just leave it here, please. But I was scrutinising the children's portfolio quite closely, and we had a situation where we had a director of the service that was then removed, and then the positions were changed, and then there was a new structure put in place, and there was a chief exec officer that was removed, and it was very, very messy. And agency staff work was getting out of control. And I'm really glad that in this report, it really does show the strength of what's been going on since. And I would like to thank Martin for his work on this and for other officers on really getting that use of agency work under control, which will lower costs. It's going to take time, but I think we're on the right path now. And thank you very much for your comments. But seriously, let's tell the truth.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Councillor Lomas. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something for the benefit of others who might be listening. Ward funding is allocated for a financial year. And as we all know, in the last 4 financial years, there have been changes made to how ward funding is allocated each year. And each year, members are informed that it's not guaranteed to carry over if it's unspent at the end of the financial year. And in some years, it has been carried over. But anyone who went out making promises in the run into an election that they could not guarantee, making promises for spending in the future that they did not know would happen, is now reaping the reward of that. And it's quite right that unspent and uncommitted ward funding is repurposed to cover overspends of statutory vital services for residents in our city. So what I would say is, if you are given an allocation of ward funding and told it's for this financial year, then believe what you're told, listen to what you're told, make decisions on the basis of what you're told. And then you won't need to be in a situation where you've made promises that you can't deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Eyre.
I think points of clarity, we shouldn't be saying people are lying or telling fibs at a point. That's not against the code of conduct, but nobody is. So to give specific examples, I have asked questions. So I asked the finance officer for the full breakdown of what that figure for ward committees is. I then asked officers and communities to outline what that funding was set against. We have not, after 2 days, each ward councillor has also contacted to find out what that is about. We've only had one response so far, and the response was that the only unspent funding in that particular ward was for a scheme that has been completed, but has not yet been paid for. It was completed in the previous financial year, but has not been paid for. That's the total underspend in terms of that. So if what you're saying is that you're honouring that payment, then that's 250, not 265 in that already. And in terms of your comments regarding not committing funding, funding was committed for summer programmes. So those summer programmes are invoiced in the summer. So if anybody had been told at that point that prior to April, you couldn't commission Easter programmes, you couldn't commission summer programmes, those wouldn't have gone ahead. We've already lost work from the Football Foundation, from the Knights Foundation, because those decisions were stopped post-April. But it would equally appear that those that were committed pre-April have also been stopped and have been included in the 260 underspent. These questions have all been asked and we've not as yet had an answer. The only answer we have is that one figure for one ward, and we have in writing from the officer, the figure included for that ward in terms of what is listed as money not spent or underspent is money that has not yet been paid for a scheme that has been delivered.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd just like to say, I think that if that is the situation in the wards that you're talking about, you're living under a totally different funding profile than the one where I work, and it's not something I recognise. And I'm just looking around the table here. I don't think other people recognise this, so perhaps we need to look into it further. Thank you. Right, okay, can we move to, Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Chair. Debbie, can I just ask you, you mentioned something about we can't keep plugging the gap, as it were, in terms of spending with one-off payments. So what have we been taking money from funds that are running out to try and plug that gap? Is that what you're saying? And also just in terms of the view for looking at this variation here and the view for the situation we're in, what do you think is going to be the shortfall between what we've got and what we actually need to spend?
Thank you. Yeah, we have managed to use one-off funds, and obviously, certainly during the previous 3 to 4 years, we had COVID right in the middle of it that kind of upended everything financially. So we had a lot of additional costs, but we also had a lot of additional grant from government. And then the city's recovery, certainly in terms of parking income, has again helped this year. Now, there's nothing to suggest that will continue. I'm looking at Neil, I'm sure hopefully it will continue with those high levels of visitors into the city. But they are sort of underlying pressures that, again, are not unique to York. These are national issues that I think would require a national solution. So the issues around children's and adults, and I'm sure Jamila and Martin could talk to you at length about what some of those issues are, and national funding issues. And so they're not necessarily things that are going to be easily to resolve. So that would involve you looking at your priorities and deciding what you would stop doing in order to fund those rising costs of social care. The other particular issue we've had, certainly in the last financial year, has been the impact of inflation, which I think I've got in the report was about 4.5 million in total. So had we not had that increased inflation, we would have again balanced overall, but we would have balanced through that additional parking income, which doesn't feel a very sustainable situation. As we saw through COVID, things can impact on that income stream that again beyond your control. So there are some underlying issues. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
So the question was really, as we sit here today, what's the projected funding gap?
Yeah, so certainly the work we're doing on the medium-term financial strategy would suggest that the overspend that we've seen in the previous financial year of 4.5 million is forecast to continue and increase because those pressures are increasing. Again, demand and complexity in some of our services, increased demand from services. So my estimate would be around about 10 million per year budget gap, certainly for the next 4 years. These estimates, obviously, there's a lot of caveats on that. We're unclear what the national funding position is, but all of the things being equal, that's the sort of scale of the challenge that we would see.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
This is my first executive committee meeting as both an elected councillor and as an executive member. I'm finding it really extraordinarily perplexing to listen to Councillor Eyre trying to explain small amounts of money in budget lines that he thinks he can nitpick through to point at this new administration, given the absolute fiasco of the previous administration when it came to managing the council finances. I find it quite extraordinary. And we can all agree that we need some national change in order to deliver on the priorities for the city. But at the moment, I would say that actually we've got a serious long-term plan for the residents of the city, and we are currently trying to put that together in order to clear up some of the mess that we are picking up from the previous administration. And I think it would be nice if that was respected a little bit more than it appears to be happening at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. And just to add to that, I think, I hope, Councillor Eyre, you can see the whole council has a challenge ahead of us to make sure that we are financially sustainable. And I look forward to working constructively with you on that. Right, everybody, can we move to the vote then, please? So the recommendations are on page 128 to note the information in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? Thank you. Thank you, that's passed. Right, everybody, capital programme, item number 9. Debbie, I think that's you again. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, this report sets out the progress in delivering the capital programme and the year-end position again as at 31st of March 23, and also includes details of the overall funding of the programme. Continues to be a significant level of investment in a wide range of schemes, and some of the key areas of progress are listed at paragraphs 2 and 3 at the start of the report. As with the revenue report we've just discussed, inflation and rising interest rates continue to impact on prices that are quoted for works, and contractors' willingness, I guess, to fix prices in quotes and tenders. So that has, and I think will continue to put pressure on the capital programme. So that's just something to bear in mind as we move through. There has again been some slippage with a few projects, which has resulted in some reprofiling of the programme to move both the planned spend and any associated funding to future years in line with expected progress in delivery. There is a lot of detail in the report. I've nothing else specifically to draw to your attention.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Debbie on the capital programme? Councillor Lomas.
Thank you. I think it's just worth noting that obviously the information contained in this report relates to the previous administration, and clearly there will be a lot of work to do this year and for the next 4 years, making sure that our capital programme can deliver for the city, but is sensible in the current circumstances that we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. That seems like yesterday, but it was 4 years ago that I sat here and announced what was sort of a 5-year, £600 million capital programme. A lot's changed in terms of that particular period. I think this report is the latest evidence of the significant delivery that was made against that, despite the impact of COVID taking out the majority of that period, despite serious financial crises and government in chaos that wasn't performing particularly well in the first place. It's seen big ticket delivery, so York Central on the ground, Station Gateway, the largest council house building in a generation, York Outer Ring Road progressing, the stadium open, the Guildhall open. They're all the big ticket things. It's easy to forget the less obvious. So £40 million, I think, over that period on highways repair, the largest investment in a capital programme in highways repair the city has ever seen. £40 million plus in council house modifications and repairs work. We saw the Beehive, Lincoln Court, Marjorie Waite Court, James House, all delivered during this period. The library investment programme, the community woodland. We've seen the hyperhubs and the electrification of both the CYC fleet and public transport, amongst many other delivery of capital programmes. This administration, as Councillor Lomas alluded to, has been handed an incredible legacy from 8 years of hard work. This paper represents 576 million of a 5-year programme that's presented to us now, perhaps being reduced depending on what you alluded to. And that's what leads us to the level of concern and uncertainty that's out in the city. There's a disconnect between the programme being presented here and the administration's previous promises. So we will be seeking early clarity on proposed changes and how these will affect the major schemes and the work of our key partners.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Anybody else like to speak at this point in time? No, thank you. Right, so the recommendations are on page 171. Please, can I see those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. Item 10 is Treasury Management Annual Report and Review of Prudential Indicators for 2022 and 23. And again, Debbie, if you'd like to run us through that, please.
Thank you. So this is a statutory report that's required by the Prudential Code. The layout, it gives an economic overview, which actually can often be out of date by the time it gets to this meeting, so apologies for that. And it also reviews the prudential indicators so that you can see that we've remained within our limits in terms of things like borrowing and making investments. No new borrowing was undertaken during the previous financial year, and there were no significant changes to the strategy to bring to your attention. So this same report will be considered by Audit and Governance Committee in their scrutiny role on the 19th of July. So thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. Any comments, questions for Debbie at all? No. Okay. Thank you, everybody. In that case, then, can I see those in favour of the recommendations on page 195, please? Thank you. Thank you. And then our final item is 11, urgent business, and I've not been informed of any urgent business. So on that note, that happy note, I close the meeting and thank you all for attendance and for watching us at home. Thank you.